You walk through a quiet forest in late autumn. The air is sharp, filled with the scent of fallen leaves and distant wood smoke. Beneath your feet, the ground is littered with maple leaves, red as spilled blood, soft as silk. Somewhere ahead you hear the faint clang of steel, not the roar of battle, but the ghost of it, echoing from a past that refuses to die. This is Japan in the twilight of the samurai era. The age of the sword is fading, replaced by rifles, telegraphs, and trains that whistle like iron dragons. Yet among the shadows, one figure lingers, the so-called last samurai, a man whose story is both legend and lament. His name, Saigō Takamori. Historians argue whether he was a traitor or a martyr. Some call him the rebel who defied modern Japan, refusing to surrender to the march of progress. Others hail him as a tragic hero, a man who embodied the honor of the samurai even as the world left that honor behind. You imagine him now, a warrior wrapped in black silk, his hand resting on the hilt of a katana polished by generations. Around him, a dwindling band of followers, samurai stripped of their status, men who once carried the weight of feudal power but are now reduced to shadows. Their eyes burn with loyalty, though they know their fate is sealed. The world around them is no longer theirs. The Meiji Restoration has shattered the old order. Samurai stipends are gone. Swords are forbidden in the streets, and Western uniforms parade where once only the warrior's armor stood. For men like Saigō, this is not reform, it is betrayal, and so he marches not toward victory but toward a forbidden end, an end written not in triumph but in blood and silence. You walk deeper into the memory of Japan, where the old world collapses like a burning palace. Lantern light glimmers faintly on lacquered gates, but beyond them, the new age storms in with iron and smoke. The year is the late 1800s, and the Meiji Restoration has declared itself the dawn of progress. For some it is light, for the samurai it is a funeral pyre. Saigō Takamori was born into the world of the sword, where loyalty to one's lord was not only duty, but destiny. In his youth, the air smelled of oil polishing blades, of incense at shrines where warriors prayed for strength before battle. He rose from modest beginnings to become a figure of immense respect, a man whose heart beat to the rhythm of Bushidō, the way of the warrior. But by the time his hair turned silver, Japan itself was changing beyond recognition. Steamships loomed in harbors, their smoke blotting out the sails of old junks. Western suits crept into courts where once silk robes whispered. Rifles cracked in drills where swords once sang. Samurai stipends, lifeblood of their status, were cut then abolished. The decree was merciless. The era of hereditary warriors was over. Historians still debate, was this necessary? Some argue the reforms were salvation, lifting Japan from feudal stagnation into the modern world. Others say it was too fast, too brutal, stripping centuries of tradition overnight, leaving proud men adrift, their honor reduced to relics for museums. You imagine the silence of a samurai house in these years. The swords still hang on the wall, but no hand reaches for them. Sons, once trained to fight, now study foreign sciences. Fathers, once lords of small domains, now wander as clerks or beggars. In the marketplaces, old warriors sell their blades, trading steel for coins that weigh heavy with humiliation. Saigō watched this with a heart split in two. He had once supported the Meiji reforms, believing Japan needed strength to resist Western conquest. Yet he also saw what the reforms destroyed. His fellow samurai, men who had shed blood for their lords, now tossed aside like discarded armor. Their pride turned to despair, their despair into rage. The government decreed swords banned in the streets. The very soul of the warrior, the curved steel that was both weapon and spirit outlawed, reduced to ceremony. Samurai were told to cut their hair, abandon their top-knots, wear Western clothing. They were told to become modern, to forget what they were. And Saigō, caught between loyalty to the emperor and loyalty to his people, felt the old world shatter inside him. His loyalty had always been absolute, yet now it was divided between an emperor who embraced the new and a warrior class dying in silence. It is said that in these years, Saigō wandered the fields and forests of his homeland, surrounded by followers who still clung to the way of the sword. Their whispers carried through villages. The last samurai will rise. He will restore honor. Whether these whispers were hope or prophecy, no one could say, but the pressure mounted. Like water behind a dam, and Saigō Takamori, the man who had served emperors and dreamed of loyalty, would become the symbol of rebellion. For the old Japan did not die quietly. It died with fire. You step into the restless air of Kagoshima, Saigō Takamori's homeland. The streets are alive with tension, not from celebration, but from anger coiled tight as a drawn bow. Former samurai, stripped of their stipends and honor, wander like exiles in their own land. Their hands itch for the hilts of swords they are forbidden to wear. Their pride, once the backbone of Japan, is now reduced to whispers and smoldering glances. At night, in flickering lamplight, groups of discontented warriors gather in tea houses and abandoned shrines. They speak in low voices, their words sharp as hidden daggers. They remember the way things were, the feasts of lords, the clash of steel, the certainty of Bushidō. Now they are told they must be clerks, merchants, farmers. To them this is worse than death. Historians record this tension as inevitable. The Meiji government pressed too hard, too fast. Progress demanded sacrifice, but the sacrifice fell squarely on the shoulders of the samurai. Their privileges dissolved, their identity outlawed. Some adapted, many could not. And in the center of this storm stood Saigō Takamori. His reputation was enormous. To the disillusioned samurai, he was not just a man. He was their voice, their symbol, their last hope. His very name was enough to ignite loyalty. He had once been a trusted advisor to the emperor, a general who helped overthrow the Tokugawa shogunate. Now, in the eyes of the betrayed warriors, he was the one man who could restore dignity. You walk through the gardens of his residence, where men kneel before him, their voices trembling with devotion. Lead us, they plead. Bring back the way of the sword. Restore the honor of the warrior. Their faces glow with desperation, as if salvation itself is wrapped in his presence. But Saigō was torn. He loved his emperor, he loved his country. He did not wish to be a traitor, yet he could not ignore the suffering of the samurai who clung to him. To refuse them was to abandon them. To lead them was to defy the very government he once served. Historians still argue, was Saigō pushed by his followers into rebellion, or did he embrace it willingly? Some say he resisted, that he was reluctant to rise. Others believe he saw no other path, that the soul of Japan was being smothered, and only fire could cleanse it. The spark was lit in 1877. The samurai of Satsuma, his homeland, declared themselves ready for war. They forged weapons in secret, polished swords that had not tasted blood in years, and prepared to march against the government. To them this was not treason, it was salvation, the last stand of Bushidō against the tide of modernity. You hear the drums, faint at first, then louder, echoing through the hills. You see the banners unfurl, crimson against the morning sky. Samurai, once broken and scattered, now gathered in ranks, their armor gleaming, their faces set with grim resolve. At their head stands Saigō Takamori. He does not roar like a tyrant. He does not exult like a conqueror. He walks with the weight of sorrow, as if each step acknowledges the inevitability of tragedy. Yet he leads them still. The rebellion has begun. The last samurai has risen, and Japan itself trembles at the sound of his march. You walk along the dusty roads that snake out of Kagoshima, where banners ripple in the wind and boots pound in unison. The Satsuma rebellion has taken shape, and thousands march beneath the crimson flags of defiance. Their armor gleams with memory, their swords sharpened with desperation. Each man knows this march is not toward triumph, but toward a grave carved in fire. Still they march. The countryside watches in silence. Farmers bow as the columns pass, not out of loyalty, but out of awe. These are relics walking, men of a world already erased by decree. Children gape at helmets that once symbolized terror and majesty, now worn by men on their way to death. Some villagers cheer softly, whispering that the old gods favor these warriors. Others turn away, fearing the wrath of the Meiji army that follows close behind. Historians note the paradox of this march. By 1877, Japan had already begun to master rifles, artillery, and Western military organization. The government forces were disciplined, drilled, and supplied. The samurai rebels, though fierce, were armed mostly with swords and muskets long obsolete. To the modern world, their cause was doomed from the start. Yet this was never about victory. It was about honor. You picture Saigō Takamori riding at the head, his face calm, unreadable. He does not shout, does not boast. His silence is heavier than any speech. To his men, that silence is courage. To historians, it is resignation, the knowledge that he is leading them into a battle already lost. Still he goes. At night, campfires dot the hillsides. The samurai sit cross-legged, their voices low, chanting old poems. Some sharpen blades under the starlight, the rasp of steel against stone echoing like a death song. Others write letters to families they know they will never see again. And in the stillness they look to Saigō. He sits apart, gazing into the flames, as if seeking answers in the dance of fire. The march is slow, deliberate. Each town they enter swells with rumors. The last samurai is rising. The emperor will be restored to the old ways. Bushidō will triumph. The whispers spread faster than their footsteps, until even in Tokyo the government quakes with unease. For though the rebellion may be doomed militarily, its symbolism is dangerous. A single figure, the revered general of old, has become the rallying cry for all who resent the Meiji reforms. The government responds with force. Armies are dispatched, rifles gleaming, cannons dragged across muddy roads. They carry with them not only the authority of modern Japan, but the inevitability of history itself. Their mission is clear: to extinguish the last breath of the samurai. You stand on a hill as dawn breaks. Below, the rebel army stretches across the valley, a river of silk and steel. Above them, banners snap in the wind, bearing crests that once commanded fealty from domains now dissolved. Ahead lies battle, unwinnable yet unavoidable. The march is nearly done. The war is about to begin, and with it, the legend of the last samurai will be written in blood. You stand at the edge of a valley where mist clings low to the earth, as though the land itself tries to veil what is about to unfold. Dawn has barely broken, yet already the thunder of drums and the shrill calls of horns split the silence. On one side, Saigō Takamori and his samurai, their banners fluttering like crimson flames against the pale sky. On the other, the imperial army of the Meiji state, rifles gleaming, cannons crouched like iron beasts waiting to roar. The air is heavy with anticipation, Samurai tighten the cords of their helmets, slide their hands along the hilts of blades polished to mirrors. They breathe in silence, as if drawing the courage of their ancestors into their lungs. Some murmur prayers to the kami. Others whisper farewells to families they left behind. They know this battle is not for land, not for power. It is for honor, for Bushidō itself. The first shot cracks like lightning. A soldier of the Imperial Army pulls his trigger, and the sound rolls across the field. It is followed by a volley, a storm of bullets whistling through the air. Samurai shields splinter. Men cry out, bodies fall. Yet still they charge. You watch as the rebels surge forward, blades flashing in arcs of silver. They rush into the storm of fire, their cries shaking the earth. To witness it is to see defiance incarnate. Men who would rather die with steel in hand than live as shadows in a new world. Some reach the enemy lines, their katanas biting through uniforms and flesh, cutting down soldiers stunned by their fury, but rifles reload faster than swords can swing. Cannons thunder, hurling iron and flame into the charging mass. Smoke thickens, choking the field. The samurai cut down one foe, only to be struck by 3 more. Blood mixes with the mist, until the valley itself seems to weep red. Historians describe these first clashes as desperate, almost suicidal. The rebels were outnumbered, outgunned, and outsupplied. Yet they fought with a ferocity that astonished even their enemies. Government commanders recorded their admiration for Saigō's men, noting their fearlessness even as they fell by the hundreds. You picture Saigō himself, standing tall amid the carnage. He does not flinch as bullets hiss past. His commands are steady, his presence unshaken. To his men he is more than a leader. He is the embodiment of their cause. His calm in chaos is the fire that keeps them fighting. As the sun climbs, the battlefield is transformed into a nightmare of shattered bodies, broken banners, and smoldering earth. The rebels retreat, not in cowardice, but in grim necessity. They gather their wounded. They bury their dead quickly with prayers whispered into the soil. And still, in their eyes, no fear lingers, for the samurai know this was only the beginning. Their rebellion is already drenched in blood, but their spirit is not broken. The last samurai still stands, and his defiance echoes louder than cannon fire. You walk beneath the looming walls of Kumamoto Castle, its black timbered towers rising like watchful sentinels against the grey sky. Here the fate of the rebellion sharpens into its deadliest form. A siege. Saigō Takamori has brought his forces, nearly 20,000 strong, to challenge one of the most formidable strongholds in Japan. To take Kumamoto would mean momentum. To fail would mean doom. The samurai surround the fortress, their banners planted in the muddy earth, their campfires burning night after night like stars fallen to the ground. They cut supply lines, they batter gates with cannon fire, yet the walls remain defiant. Inside, the imperial garrison of 3,000 holds firm, bolstered by rifles, artillery, and a steady stream of reinforcements. At dawn, arrows streak through the air, a whisper of the old ways. By midday, rifle fire answers with thunder. The ground is littered with bodies by nightfall, yet neither side yields. Samurai charge the walls again and again, their ladders splintered, their cries drowned in musket fire. They fall in heaps, but their comrades climb over them relentless, as if death itself cannot turn them back. You wander through the rebel camp after sunset. Men sit with torn armor, blood-soaked bandages, eyes hollow from exhaustion. They sharpen swords they know will likely never strike true. Some write poems of farewell, inked with trembling hands. Others simply sit in silence, staring at the castle that will not break. In their hearts they know the truth. Their swords cannot conquer stone and fire. Historians call the siege of Kumamoto the turning point of the Satsuma Rebellion. Saigō's forces, brave as they were, could not match modern artillery, nor withstand the endless flow of government troops. Supplies dwindled. Hunger gnawed at the rebels. Disease crept into their ranks. And still they fought. Saigō himself walked the lines at night, speaking softly to his men, urging them to endure. His presence was a balm, but his eyes betrayed the burden he carried. He knew the odds. He knew the siege could not last. Yet he refused to abandon those who had followed him into fire. Weeks dragged into months. The fields around Kumamoto became a graveyard. The soil churned with blood. The rebels' numbers shrank. Their strength waned. And still the castle stood, its towers black and unbroken against the storm. You stand at the edge of the battlefield, where smoke drifts low and the stench of death clings to the wind. The siege has failed. The rebels withdraw at last, carrying their wounded on makeshift stretchers, their banners tattered but not lowered. They retreat not as victors but as shadows chased by dawn. And yet even in defeat their defiance lingers. For the last samurai, failure is not the end. It is only another step toward the inevitable tragedy that awaits. You walk the narrow mountain roads where Saigō Takamori and his followers retreat, their ranks thinning like smoke in the wind. Once they marched as an army of thousands, banners high, blades gleaming. Now they stagger forward as survivors, wounded, weary, hunted by the very nation they once swore to protect. The mountains echo with the clash of skirmishes. Government troops armed with rifles and cannons pursue them relentlessly. Every valley becomes a battlefield, every village a test of loyalty. The rebels fight like cornered tigers, striking swiftly with swords that flash in the dark, then vanishing into the forests. Yet with each clash their numbers dwindle further, their strength bleeding into the soil. Food grows scarce. Horses collapse from exhaustion. Men gnaw on roots, boil strips of leather, drink from streams that taste of rust and mud. Once proud samurai now wear rags over broken armor, their banners torn and stained with blood. Still they march behind Saigō, refusing to abandon him. For he is more than their general. He is their last hope that Bushidō has not been extinguished. Historians describe this retreat as both heroic and futile. Modern Japan was relentless, its armies disciplined and supplied, its rifles cutting down rebels before swords could reach their targets. Yet what astonished observers was not victory. It was the rebels' refusal to surrender. Time and again they could have laid down their arms, begged for mercy. Instead they fought on, as though death itself was the only true resolution. At night the rebel camp burns with a strange kind of serenity. Men wounded beyond healing smile as they share cups of bitter sake. They recite poetry beneath the stars, verses about loyalty, about cherry blossoms falling in spring, about the fleeting beauty of life. Each word carries the weight of farewell. You picture Saigō among them, seated on the ground, his presence calm even in ruin. His face is weathered, his eyes shadowed, but his spirit does not waver. He does not speak of victory, only of honor. To his men, that is enough. To historians, it is the mark of inevitability, the quiet dignity of a man who knows he walks toward death. The retreat winds deeper into the mountains, leaving behind battlefields strewn with broken armor and unburied bodies. Villagers whisper as the rebels pass. The last samurai still fights. Children run to the roads to glimpse the battered warriors, their innocence colliding with the sight of men who carry both glory and doom upon their shoulders. And through it all, the government forces press closer. Each mile narrows the rebels' path. Each day brings them nearer to the end they cannot escape. You stand on a ridge looking down at their weary procession. The path ahead twists like a serpent through the mountains, but its destination is already written. The last samurai is retreating, but he is not defeated. Not yet. You walk into a clearing where the rebels have made camp, their fires flickering weakly against the night. The air is cold, sharp, filled with the smell of damp earth and ash. Here, amid hunger and exhaustion, something fierce remains unbroken, the spirit of Bushidō. Men sit in circles, their faces gaunt, their robes torn, but their voices steady as they recite verses of loyalty and death. Some quote ancient texts, words once taught to boys training for a life of service. The way of the warrior is found in death. Others whisper old proverbs about honor shining brighter than life itself. Their bodies may falter, but their hearts still burn with a code older than any empire. Saigō Takamori listens in silence. He knows these words are not merely ritual. They are a covenant, the bond that ties these men to him and to one another. He does not promise them victory. He cannot. What he offers is dignity, the chance to die as samurai rather than live as forgotten men in a world that no longer has room for them. Historians argue endlessly about Bushidō in this moment. Was it true devotion to a timeless code, or was it romanticized desperation, clung to by men who had nothing left? Some claim that Saigō and his followers were blind to reality, unable to adapt to a modern world. Others see in them something profound, the final, brilliant flare of an ideal that shaped centuries of Japanese history. You imagine their rituals as night deepens. A man sharpens his katana slowly, each stroke across the whetstone a meditation. Another writes a farewell poem, his brush trembling, ink bleeding into the page like blood into silk. Some prepare their armor, polishing dents that will never be straightened, tying cords that will soon be cut. These acts are not for war. They are for death, and they know it. In the quiet, Saigō walks among them. His presence is a lantern in the dark. He speaks softly, reminding them of loyalty, of honor, of the cherry blossom that falls at its peak, never withered, never wasted. His men bow their heads not in submission but in devotion. They do not follow him because they expect to win. They follow because they cannot imagine walking into death beside anyone else. Beyond the camp, the government army closes in. Their rifles glint under moonlight, their bayonets gleam. They carry the future of Japan in their hands. Order, modernization, power forged from steel and gunpowder. Yet for the samurai in this clearing, the future is meaningless. All that matters is the code. You sit among them for a moment, hearing the hush of voices, the quiet rustle of cloth, the low hum of chants. There is no fear here, only acceptance. The samurai know the end is near, but they will not face it as fugitives or criminals. They will face it as warriors of the old way, bound by Bushidō until their last breath. The night deepens, the fire dies low, and silence settles. Tomorrow brings battle, tomorrow brings death, but tonight the spirit of Bushidō glows like an ember, refusing to be extinguished. You climb the slopes of Shiroyama, the hill where the end of the samurai will be carved into history. The morning air is sharp, the grass wet with dew, and the horizon glows faintly with the red of dawn, cherry blossoms painted by fire. At the summit, Saigō Takamori and his last warriors wait. No more than 500 men against the thousands of the imperial army below. The government forces are relentless. Nearly 30,000 soldiers encircle the hill, their rifles polished, their cannons already aimed. Trenches snake across the land, iron and gunpowder forming a cage around the rebels. Escape is impossible. The end is inevitable. And yet there is no despair among the samurai. You hear the low hum of their chants, the whisper of prayers carried on the wind. Some kneel with hands folded, others polish their swords one last time. They do not shout, they do not rage. They prepare for death as one prepares for a final ceremony, solemn, deliberate, inevitable. Saigō walks among them, his presence calm, his face carved with sorrow and resolve. He speaks not of victory but of honor. "We will die as warriors," he tells them, his voice low but steady. His men bow, their eyes shining, their bodies weary but unyielding. In this moment, he is not only their leader, he is their destiny. At dawn's first light, the cannons roar. Explosions shatter the hillside, earth and stone erupting into the sky. The samurai scatter, regroup, charge forward with blades flashing. Bullets slice the air, tearing through armor and flesh, yet still they advance. Their cries echo across the battlefield, fierce and defiant, shaking the hearts of soldiers below. Historians describe this as slaughter, but also as legend. Wave after wave of samurai hurled themselves into the firestorm. Muskets cracked, swords clashed, bodies fell, yet the rebels fought with the ferocity of lions. They charged again and again, knowing each step might be their last, yet refusing to bow. You see them break through lines, their katanas cutting arcs of silver before being swallowed by the flood of rifles. You hear the clash of steel, the cries of agony, the thunder of artillery. The hill becomes a furnace of blood and smoke, a stage where Bushidō performs its final act. Saigō himself is struck, wounded as he fights among his men. His blood stains the earth, but his resolve does not falter. His followers rally around him, carrying him back into the chaos. Even in agony, his presence is unbroken, his spirit burning brighter than the cannon fire that seeks to erase him. By midday, the hill is carpeted with bodies, banners fallen, armor shattered. Yet the samurai fight until their last breath, their swords cutting until their arms can no longer rise. And as the sun climbs higher, the battle that began as defiance becomes legend. The last stand of the samurai written in blood upon Shiroyama's stones. Smoke coils across the slopes of Shiroyama, drifting like torn silk through the broken bodies of warriors. The battle has turned to massacre. The government forces tighten their ring, muskets and cannons roaring without pause. Among the rubble and the dying, Saigō Takamori still breathes, wounded, bleeding, yet unyielding. You walk beside him as his followers carry him to a quiet hollow near the crest of the hill. His face is pale, his robes darkened with blood. He knows his time has come and his eyes are steady, not with fear but with acceptance. Around him, the last of his men form a circle, swords drawn, ready to defend him with the final fragments of their lives. Historians argue about this moment. Some say he ordered one of his closest retainers to strike him down, a final act of loyalty. Others claim he performed seppuku himself, pressing the blade to his abdomen in the ritual suicide of his class. Still others whisper he simply died from his wounds, his death later enshrined in legend. The truth is veiled, as if history itself sought to preserve his dignity in mystery. What is certain is this: Saigō Takamori did not fall as a common rebel. He died as a samurai. His last breath carried the weight of centuries, the final echo of a code that had defined Japan for generations. You imagine the silence in that moment. The cannons thunder still, but around him the world narrows to a single act, the release of a warrior's soul. The sword gleams, the breath catches, and then the blood spills, dark as ink, staining the earth of Shiroyama. His men bow low, tears burning in their eyes, their voices whispering prayers. They fight on not to win, but to honor him, to die beside their master. When the battle ends, nearly every rebel lies dead. The government soldiers pick their way through the corpses, stunned by the ferocity they have witnessed. And among them, the body of Saigō is found. Head raised, face calm, as though even in death he still defies the new age. Historians say his death marked not only the end of a man, but the end of an era. The way of the sword, the rule of the samurai, the age of Bushidō as the heart of Japan, all ended on that hill, in that single crimson dawn. Yet his legend did not end. Even his enemies revered him, calling him a true patriot, a tragic hero. The emperor himself mourned him, granting him pardon after death, naming him not traitor but saint of loyalty. His rebellion was crushed, but his honor survived. You stand on the blood-soaked soil of Shiroyama. The smoke thins, the cries fade, and the wind carries only silence. Here the last samurai has fallen, and yet in his death he became eternal. The battlefield of Shiroyama falls silent. Where once thousands clashed, now only the wind stirs, carrying the scent of gunpowder and blood. The ground is littered with the bodies of Saigō's followers, their swords still clutched in lifeless hands. Among them lies their leader, the man who had become both symbol and sacrifice. Saigō Takamori is gone, yet his presence lingers like smoke that refuses to fade. You walk through the aftermath. Government soldiers move cautiously among the corpses, their boots sinking into mud, darkened by blood. Some avert their eyes, unable to look upon the faces of men who fought with such terrifying devotion. Others stand in awe, whispering to one another about the courage they have witnessed. Even victors bow their heads, as though acknowledging they have not merely destroyed an enemy, but extinguished an era. Historians note the strangeness of what followed. The government that branded Saigō a traitor quickly transformed his image into that of a national hero. His rebellion may have been crushed, but his loyalty to his ideals, even in defiance, was celebrated. The emperor himself ordered Saigō pardoned after death, declaring him a true patriot. What irony that the man who fought against the new order became sanctified by it. Among the people, his legend grew even faster. Farmers told stories of the general who died for honor. Merchants whispered his name as if it carried protection. Mothers taught their sons that Bushidō lived on through Saigō, even as the world turned to factories and rifles. His image blurred between fact and myth until he became less a man than an eternal symbol, the embodiment of loyalty, tragedy, and defiance. You picture shrines being built in his name, poems written in his memory, plays and songs recounting the fall at Shiroyama. For some, he was a martyr of the old Japan. For others, he was a bridge. His sacrifice allowed the nation to modernize without forgetting its soul. In this way, Saigō Takamori lived on, not in flesh, but in spirit. And so the hill of Shiroyama became more than a battlefield. It became sacred ground, where the last breath of the samurai was released into the sky. Visitors still climb its slopes, pausing in silence where the blood once ran. They do not see only defeat. They see a flame that burned so fiercely it could never be extinguished. The echo of Saigō's death reverberated across Japan, across centuries. It shaped how a nation remembered its warriors, how it defined loyalty and sacrifice. And even now, long after the swords have rusted, the echo remains, quiet, haunting, eternal. The years after Saigō Takamori's death did not erase him. Instead, they transformed him. You walk through Japan decades later, where his face is no longer that of a fallen rebel but of a national icon. Woodblock prints depict him standing tall in gleaming armor, katana raised against impossible odds. Storytellers embellish his last stand, adding strokes of poetry where history leaves silence. Children grow up hearing his name whispered like a prayer, as though his ghost walks beside them. Historians argue over this myth-making. Was Saigō's image deliberately polished by the Meiji government to soothe the wounds of a nation torn between past and future? Or did the people themselves cling to him, shaping him into the hero they needed? The man who proved that even in defeat, honor could be unbroken. Both answers may be true, for legend often rises where truth leaves gaps. You hear the plays and songs retelling his end. In them, Saigō is larger than life. A general who faced the thunder of rifles with nothing but steel, who died smiling beneath the banner of Bushidō. In reality, the chaos of Shiroyama was blood and smoke, confusion and despair. But in memory it becomes ritual, a pure sacrifice that redeems the soul of the samurai. Even abroad, Saigō's legend travels. Western writers call him the Japanese Leonidas, comparing his stand at Shiroyama to the Spartans at Thermopylae. To them, he embodies a romantic ideal of noble warriors resisting the march of modernity. Never mind that the truth was messier, darker. The myth is what endures. You wander through Tokyo's Ueno Park, where a statue of Saigō still stands today. He is not dressed as a samurai, but in simple hunting garb, a dog at his side. This image, humble, grounded, was chosen deliberately, a reminder that he belonged to the people, not just to warriors. And yet, every passerby knows the truth. Beneath that simplicity lies the memory of the last samurai, the man who would not bow to the tide of change. Myth has power. It softens edges, erases contradictions, and turns men into symbols. Saigō Takamori, who lived torn between loyalty and rebellion, is remembered not for compromise but for defiance. His flaws blur, his failures fade, leaving only the gleam of legend. You realize then history ends but myth does not. On the slopes of Shiroyama, the last samurai fell. But in the hearts of generations, he still rises again and again each time the cherry blossoms fall. You walk into the chambers of the Meiji court, where the young emperor sits draped in robes that blend the old and the new, silken folds paired with Western medals. Here in the heart of modern Japan, Saigō Takamori's ghost lingers, haunting both throne and nation. For the emperor himself had once trusted Saigō, relied on his strength to overthrow the shogunate and carve a new era. To brand him a traitor was necessary for order, but to leave his memory condemned would fracture the spirit of the nation. And so came the paradox. Saigō the rebel must also be Saigō the patriot. His blood soaked into the soil of Shiroyama, but his name would be polished into honor by imperial decree. Historians marvel at this contradiction. Rarely does a government that crushes a rebellion then enshrine its leader as a hero. Yet the Meiji state did just that. The emperor pardoned Saigō posthumously, calling him a man of unmatched loyalty, a warrior whose rebellion was born not of treason, but of purity of heart. In doing so, the emperor stitched together a nation divided, allowing modern Japan to march forward without wholly discarding the soul of its past. You picture courtiers whispering about the irony. The same cannons that tore Saigō's men to pieces are now silent, replaced by ceremonies honoring his loyalty. Statues rise, poems are written, and his story is taught not as rebellion but as sacrifice. Say paradox made flesh, the traitor saint. Among the people, this gesture matters deeply. Farmers who once cursed the new taxes now feel pride that their fallen hero is honored. Former samurai, stripped of their swords, see in the emperor's pardon a recognition that their code was not in vain. Even soldiers who fought against Saigō bow their heads when his name is spoken, acknowledging that without men like him, Japan would have no soul worth modernizing. You stand in the palace garden, where plum blossoms scatter on the wind. The emperor, in pardoning Saigō, ensured that modernization would not erase tradition. Yet the paradox endures unsolved. Was Saigō a rebel against progress or its most necessary martyr? The truth remains elusive. But perhaps that is the point. Saigō Takamori became not just a man of history, but a bridge between eras, his rebellion both a wound and a salve, his death both an ending and a beginning. And so, the emperor's paradox became Japan's inheritance, a nation walking forward with rifles and factories, yet carrying on its back the ghost of the last samurai. You walk through the decades that follow, where Japan reshapes itself with astonishing speed. Steamships crowd its harbors, railways carve through mountains, factories hum with the rhythm of progress. The nation that once bowed beneath the threat of foreign cannons now rises as a modern empire. And yet, beneath the clang of iron and the smoke of industry, the heartbeat of Bushidō still lingers, carried on the memory of Saigō Takamori. Schools teach loyalty, discipline, sacrifice. Military cadets study not only Western strategy, but also the spirit of the warrior, holding Saigō's name as a mirror of devotion. His rebellion, though crushed, becomes a lesson in purity of intent. The samurai who died for honor rather than bow to a changing world. Children learn that to be Japanese is to balance modern strength with ancient soul. Historians debate this legacy. Some claim that Bushidō, preserved through Saigō's legend, gave Japan the resolve to rise as a global power. Others warn it also planted seeds of fanaticism, where sacrifice and loyalty could be twisted into blind obedience. What cannot be denied is that Saigō's ghost infused the new Japan, ensuring that modernization did not erase its warrior heart. You walk through a village shrine where his portrait hangs. Candles flicker before it, their wax pooling like tears. Old men bow, whispering prayers to the last samurai. Young soldiers about to depart for war kneel for strength in his memory. To them he is no longer rebel nor martyr. He is guardian, spirit, symbol. Yet his legacy is not without shadow. Bushidō, once a personal code of loyalty, becomes nationalized, weaponized. Leaders invoke Saigō's name to stir courage, to demand sacrifice for emperor and state. In this transformation, his tragedy deepens. For the man who fought to preserve dignity becomes, in memory, a rallying cry for wars he never foresaw. And still the legend endures. Plays and novels retell his story, each adding new color, each shaping him closer to myth. Western visitors marvel at the statue in Ueno Park, calling him a noble relic of a vanished age. Japanese poets compare him to the cherry blossom, falling at its peak, never fading into decay. You stand once more on the hill of Shiroyama, now quiet, its grass grown over the scars of battle. The air is calm, the view wide. Here the last samurai fell, but from here also rose the spirit of Bushidō that would echo through Japan's future. The swords may be gone, the warriors dust, yet the code they carried was not buried. It lingers in silence, in ritual, in memory. The legacy of Saigō Takamori is not merely death. It is the strange, powerful survival of an idea, that honor can outlive even defeat. Night falls over Shiroyama. The city of Kagoshima glows in the distance, its lights like scattered embers across the darkened sea. You walk the slope where Saigō Takamori made his final charge, where the cries of battle once split the sky. Now there is only silence, thick, heavy, sacred. Yet in that silence something stirs. A presence, a whisper, a flame that refuses to die. The last samurai's body may have fallen, but his spirit did not. It drifts across centuries, shaping how Japan remembers itself. In every story of loyalty, in every ritual of sacrifice, his shadow flickers. When cherry blossoms fall, when steel gleams in the moonlight, when a soldier bows before departing, it is Saigō's ghost that lingers, unseen but felt. Historians write of his contradictions, loyal yet rebellious, tragic yet triumphant, defeated yet immortal. Philosophers note that in his death, Japan gained not only a hero but a mirror, a reflection of its own struggle to reconcile past and future. For in Saigō's last stand, the nation found both the cost of progress and the value of memory. You pause and imagine the cherry blossoms drifting, each petal a soul from Shiroyama. They rise, not fall, lifted by the wind toward eternity. In them is the lesson of the last samurai, that honor is not measured by victory, but by the refusal to yield what matters most. Even today, statues keep his watch. Shrines guard his name, and on the hill where he bled, visitors still bow their heads not in sorrow but in reverence, for they know that Saigō Takamori did not simply die, he became eternal. The flame of the samurai does not vanish. It burns low, hidden beneath centuries of change, yet it waits. A quiet fire glowing in memory, in story, in the spirit of a nation. And as long as Japan endures, so too will the eternal flame of its last samurai. Close your eyes now. The battle has ended, the swords are sheathed, and the roar of gunfire fades into silence. You walk slowly down the slopes of Shiroyama, where the grass sways gently in the evening breeze. The ghosts of warriors do not haunt you. They rest at peace, their spirits carried away like cherry blossoms on the wind. The night air is cool. Lanterns flicker faintly in the distance, their glow soft as candlelight. You hear the whisper of the river, the murmur of trees, the hush of a land that has known both blood and beauty. Each sound calms you. Each breath slows the weight of time. You think of Saigō Takamori, the last samurai. His struggle was fierce, his end was tragic. But in this stillness you feel not sorrow but serenity. He became a symbol, yes, but also a reminder that even in defeat there is dignity. Even in endings there is grace. Now imagine the petals drifting. One by one, soft, delicate, they fall around you. Each petal carries a memory of loyalty, of love, of sacrifice. They settle lightly on your shoulders, your hands, your heart. They do not burden you. They soothe you like the gentle touch of time. The voices of history grow faint. The night deepens. You are left with only the rhythm of your breath, slow and steady like the tide against the shore. With every breath the world softens. With every breath the weight of the story fades into quiet peace. Rest now. The last samurai keeps his watch. His eternal flame glows far away, steady and calm. A light you can return to whenever you need. Sweet dreams.